Now we're going to touch on Quest for a Black Theology, a very interesting book that was written several years ago. And there's so much information that many of us don't have to sit down and make a video and make up anything. All we really have to do is share something that is real with our people, something that is inspiring, something that is enlightening. And this is what I would like to share with my black brothers and sisters, but especially with our black men and males, since the responsibility is really upon us, and we black men and males have to reanalyze our responsibility. We have to look at it in the true light of our God and our Christ and the black Messiah and the black revolution. This is an excerpt from Albert B. Cleage Jr. In the midst of a black revolution in which black people are struggling for power, slave Christianity no longer meets their needs. But what is slave Christianity? Slave Christianity is the Christianity that old Massa gave black people way back on the plantation. It was slave Massa that defined Jesus and showed pictures of this Jesus, their Jesus, with his flowing golden locks and his baby blue eyes. Now, the obvious absurdity of the portrait never even occurred to most black folk. There was no way in the world that the real Jesus, IYESUS KRISTOS, could have looked like the pictures did in their Bibles, having been born in the very part of the world that was reserved for black people by the God of the Bible. The whiteness of their Jesus and so-called Israel was, and it still is, basic to slave Christianity. Old Massa taught black folk that God was primarily concerned with petty little sins. Don't fornicate, don't you smoke, don't play cards, and don't you drink. A petty morality too trivial for God's concern were and still are the basic elements of slave Massa's Christianity. But in truth, the whole idea of true Christianity had to do with an individual kind of salvation and preservation. 2,000 years ago on Calvary, a mystic and a misunderstood event took place. Jesus, it is said, was crucified, and somehow he rose from the dead. In this very redemptive act, God made salvation possible for individuals who believed in all generations. This meant then that each individual must fight for his own little individual salvation. Black folk. Black folk. They took this slave Massa Christianity and they made of it an instrument for their survival. They put into it a vitality which the white man didn't even have in his very own church. Black folk believed fervently because they needed to believe. They needed a dream of escape in a world in which there seemed to be no real possibility or probability, for that matter, of escape. They could conceive of no way in this world to end their oppression. So what did they do? They used this slave master theology as one way of maintaining a little bit of sanity. Slave masters Christianity made it possible for black folk to survive. The slaves took this idea of going to heaven very seriously. They took their pain and their suffering to Jesus. The slave could stand anything that the white man did, saying to himself, the white man can beat me, he can rob me, he can cheat me, he can rape my wife and my daughters. He can do anything, but I can take it all to Jesus. And I know that ultimately Jesus will triumph because through his sacrifice, God has already redeemed me. So whatever the white man does, I can and I will accept. This is why the black man went to church on Sunday and shouted with joy, running up and down the aisles in sheer ecstasy. But did you know that the most effective Christian preaching in America was in black pulpits, with ignorant black preachers preaching this slave master Christianity as no one else did in the world, before or after, to people who had to believe because they had no alternative for this mystical religious escape.